The cafeteria was nearly empty when Laura Benson sat down at the small table in the corner. Her lunch, consisting of an apple and a granola bar, was simple. She had gotten used to eating light. Her paycheck as a high school teacher barely covered rent, utilities, and the mountain of student loans she was still chipping away at. She sighed, rubbing her temples as she glanced over the stack of ungraded papers beside her. Senior year essays on ambition and success. Ironic, considering she felt like she was barely holding her own life together. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft clatter of a tray being pushed aside. A boy, thin and quiet, stood by the trash can with an empty tray, his shoulders slumped. Laura recognized him immediately, Noah Hayes, one of her students. He was a bright kid, sharp and observant, but always withdrawn. She watched as he hesitated, looking at the lunch line, then back at his pockets, as if hoping to find something there. After a moment, he turned away, heading for the exit. Something about the way he walked, the stiffness in his posture, the way he looked down, made her stomach twist. "Noah," she called before she could stop herself. He turned, startled. "Oh yeah. Did you eat?" she asked, already knowing the answer. His face flushed slightly. "I'm not really hungry." Laura knew that was a lie. She had seen it before. Students who skipped meals because they didn't have the money, who try to hide their hunger behind excuses. She reached into her bag, pulling out the $10 bill she had tucked away for emergencies. It was the last bit of cash she had until payday, but she didn't think twice. "Here," she said, standing and pressing it into his hand. "Get something to eat." Noah's eyes widened. "Can't take this, Miss Benson." "You can, and you will," she said firmly. "Consider it a loan, if it makes you feel better." He hesitated, then nodded, his fingers tightening around the bill. "I'll pay you back." Laura smiled. "Just eat, okay?" He nodded again, then hurried toward the lunch line. She watched as he used the money to buy a sandwich and a bottle of water, relief flickering across his face as he took the first bite. She didn't expect him to pay her back. She had seen too many students struggle, and she knew that a small kindness could mean everything to someone who needed it. What she didn't know then was that this moment, this simple exchange, would come back to her in a way she never could have imagined. Laura didn't think much about the $10 after that day. It wasn't the first time she had helped a student, and it wouldn't be the last. She had always believed that small acts of kindness mattered, even if they weren't repaid. The following weeks passed as usual, filled with grading papers, preparing lesson plans, and stretching her paycheck to cover the essentials. She noticed that Noah seemed a little more engaged in class, raising his hand more often, staying behind to ask questions. He still kept to himself, but there was a quiet determination in him that hadn't been there before. One afternoon, as she was gathering her things after class, Noah lingered by her desk. I wanted to say thanks again," he said, shifting his weight from foot to foot. She smiled. "You don't have to. I just wanted to make sure you ate." "I know," he said, glancing down. "But still, it meant a lot." Laura nodded, sensing there was more he wanted to say. She didn't push, just waited. Eventually, he cleared his throat. "Things have been kind of tough at home," he admitted. "My mom lost her job a while ago. She's been trying to find another one, but it's been hard. I've been trying to help out however I can." Laura's chest tightened. She had suspected something was going on, but it hurt to hear it confirmed. "I'm sorry, Noah," she said gently. "That's a lot to carry on your own." He shrugged, trying to play it off, but she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. "If you ever need anything," she said carefully, "just let me know, okay?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I will." After that, Laura paid closer attention. She noticed the days he came to school looking more tired than usual, the times he stayed late in the library, probably avoiding going home to an empty fridge. She did what she could, kept extra snacks in her desk, made sure he had the materials he needed for class. One afternoon, she saw him sitting alone in the library, flipping through a business magazine. She raised an eyebrow as she approached. "Thinking of making a career change," she teased lightly. He smirked. "Just trying to learn. If I ever want to start my own business someday, I need to understand how things work, right?" She was impressed. That's a smart way to look at it. He shrugged. I just don't want to struggle forever. Want to figure out how to do something that lasts. Laura nodded. I think you will. He looked up, surprised. You really think so? Absolutely. You're sharp, you work hard, and you care about the future. That's a strong combination. Noah seemed to absorb her words, and for the first time, she saw real confidence in his expression. Over the next year, he kept pushing himself. He took extra assignments, entered business competitions, and even started tutoring other students for a little extra income. Laura watched with pride, knowing that whatever challenges he faced, he wasn't going to let them stop him. By the time graduation rolled around, Noah had earned a scholarship to a prestigious university. On the last day of school, he stopped by her classroom one final time. I don't think I would have made it here without you, he admitted. Laura shook her head. You got here because of your own hard work, Noah. He smiled. Maybe, but you helped more than you know. She watched him walk away, feeling certain that whatever future he built for himself, it was going to be something incredible. She just had no idea how much that future would eventually come back to change her own. Years passed, and Laura's life remained much the same. She continued teaching, grading papers late into the night, and stretching her salary as far as it would go. The cost of living had risen, but her paycheck had not. Every month was a careful balancing act with bills that always seemed to arrive at the worst possible time. She had thought about leaving teaching, but it wasn't that simple. She loved her students, and despite the exhaustion, she couldn't imagine walking away from them. But lately, the weight of financial strain had become harder to ignore. One evening, as she sat at her kitchen table sorting through another stack of overdue notices, her phone rang. She barely glanced at the unknown number before answering. Ms. Benson. A deep, confident voice greeted her. Yes, this is she. This is Noah Hayes. She sat up straighter. It had been years since she'd last seen him, but she recognized his name immediately. Noah, she asked, surprised. It's been so long. How are you? I'm doing well. I actually wanted to talk to you about something important. Do you have time to meet? Laura hesitated. It wasn't often that former students reached out years later. Of course. When and where? They arranged to meet at a small cafe the next afternoon. When she arrived, she barely recognized the young man sitting at the table. He had grown taller, his posture straight, his expression confident. His clothes were sharp but understated, the kind worn by someone who had found success but didn't flaunt it. Noah, she said, smiling as she sat across from him. It's so good to see you. It's good to see you too, Miss Benson. He leaned forward slightly. I've wanted to reach out for a while, but things have been hectic. I can imagine, she said. What have you been up to? He nodded. After college, I started a business consulting firm. It took a while to gain traction, but things picked up faster than I expected. Now we work with companies across multiple industries. Laura blinked. That's incredible, Noah. His smile held something deeper than pride, gratitude. You were a big part of why I got here. She shook her head. You did this on your own. He exhaled. I worked hard, sure, but you believed in me when I was struggling. You paid attention when no one else did. That made a difference. She felt warmth in her chest, but said nothing. Noah continued, his tone shifting. I know this might seem out of the blue, but I have a job offer for you. Laura's breath caught. A job offer. He nodded. I need someone like you on my team, someone who understands people, who knows how to guide and support them. We've been expanding, and I want you to come work for us. Her mind raced. Noah, I don't have experience in business. You have experience in something more valuable, he said firmly. You know how to help people reach their potential. That's what my company is built on. We need someone who can train and mentor new hires, help them develop the right mindset for success. You've done that your whole career. She hesitated. I don't know. He smiled. I wouldn't be offering if I didn't believe you could do it. She looked down at her hands. The idea of leaving teaching was overwhelming, but so was the reality of her financial struggles. Everything in her life had been a struggle for so long. The idea of stepping into something new, something stable, was terrifying, but also exhilarating. She looked at Noah, at the young man who had once been a hungry student standing in the cafeteria, and saw the certainty in his eyes. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could change. Laura sat in her car outside the cafe long after Noah had left, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. It wasn't just about the money, though that alone could change everything. It was about leaving behind the career she had built her life around. Teaching had been more than just a job. It had been a purpose, a calling. Could she really walk away from it? The next day, she went through her usual routine, standing in front of her classroom, watching her students file in. She had always found comfort in the rhythm of school life, the familiar sound of shuffling papers, the murmur of conversations before the bell rang. But for the first time, she felt something else, a sense of hesitation. The thought of stepping out of this world, of no longer being the person at the front of the classroom, unsettled her. That evening, she called her sister Megan. "I don't even know where to start," Laura admitted, pacing her small apartment. "Try the beginning," Megan said. So Laura told her everything, about Noah, about the job offer. When she finished, there was a long pause before Megan finally spoke. "Laura, this is incredible." "I know," she said, exhaling, "but I don't know if I can do it. Teaching is all I've ever known." Megan's voice softened. "You've given everything to your students, and you'll always be an educator no matter where you go. But this could give you stability, a chance to build something for yourself." Laura sat down, pressing her fingertips to her forehead. "What if I fail?" There was a smile in Megan's voice. "What if you don't?" The words lingered with her long after they ended the call. Days passed, and Laura found herself paying closer attention to the cracks in her life, the exhaustion that never fully faded, the way she counted every dollar at the grocery store, the looming anxiety of unexpected expenses. She thought about the nights she had stayed up worrying about rent, about how often she had put herself last. One evening, she sat down with a notebook and divided the page into 2 columns, reasons to stay and reasons to go. On one side, she listed all the things she loved about teaching, the students, the moments of understanding when a lesson finally clicked, the sense of purpose. On the other, she wrote down the things she couldn't ignore, the financial stress, the limitations, the way she had put her own well-being on hold for years. She stared at the list for a long time. In the end, it was the realization that she had spent so long giving to others that she had forgotten to allow herself to grow. It was time. The next morning, she walked into the principal's office and handed in her resignation. The conversation was difficult, filled with questions and attempts to persuade her to stay. But Laura remained firm. She had made her decision. Her final weeks at the school felt surreal. She told her students she was leaving, though she kept the details brief. There were tears from some, nods of understanding from others. The hardest part was saying goodbye to the ones she knew needed her the most. But she reminded herself that she wasn't abandoning them. She was stepping into something new, something where she could still make an impact, just in a different way. On her last day, Noah sent a car to pick her up from school. As she walked out of the building for the final time, Laura felt a mix of emotions, loss, excitement, uncertainty. But underneath it all, there was something else. Hope. She was stepping into an unknown world, but for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid. Laura stepped into the sleek office building, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The entire place radiated success, glass walls, modern furniture, people moving with purpose. It was a world she had never imagined herself in, and yet here she was. At the front desk, a receptionist greeted her warmly and directed her to the elevator. As she rode up to the top floor, she took a steadying breath. This was a new chapter, and while she still carried some uncertainty, there was also a quiet excitement. When the elevator doors opened, Noah was already waiting. He looked every bit the CEO, confident, poised. But when he saw her, his expression softened. "Welcome," he said, gesturing for her to follow him to his office. She stepped inside, taking in the view from the massive windows. The city stretched out before them, a far cry from the classroom she had spent years in. Noah motioned for her to sit, then took a seat across from her. I wanted to talk to you before you start, he said. She nodded, waiting. You changed my life, Miss Benson, he said plainly. That day in the cafeteria, it wasn't just about the $10. It was about someone seeing me, caring when I felt invisible. Laura felt a lump rise in her throat but said nothing, letting him continue. I've thought about that moment a lot over the years, he admitted, and I've always known that if I ever got to a place where I could give back, I would. He reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the desk. What is this? She asked, eyeing it cautiously. Open it, he said with slightly unsteady fingers. She lifted the flap and pulled out a check. Her breath caught as her eyes landed on the number, $150. Her head snapped up. Noah, this is a thank you, he interrupted gently, for believing in me when I needed it most. She shook her head, overwhelmed. This is too much. It's not, he said firmly. That small act of kindness set something in motion that changed everything, and now I want to do the same for you. She stared at the check, her mind struggling to process it. This money, this incredible life-changing amount, meant no more sleepless nights worrying about bills, no more scraping by. It meant security, a future. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back, looking at Noah. I don't even know what to say, she admitted. You don't have to say anything, he replied. Just promise me you'll use it for you, not for anyone else, not for work, just for yourself. She let out a shaky laugh. That might be the hardest thing anyone's ever asked me to do. He smiled. Then it's about time you learned how. She looked down at the check one more time before carefully placing it back in the envelope. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something she had long denied: relief. And with it, hope. Laura sat in her new office, the soft hum of the city below, filtering through the large windows. The transition from teaching to this corporate world had been smoother than she had expected, but there were still moments when she caught herself hesitating, as if waiting for the familiar sound of a school bell to snap her back into her old life. But this was her life now, a fresh start, a stable future. She glanced at the framed photo she had placed on her desk, a picture of her last class taken on the final day of school. Their smiles reminded her of the years she had spent guiding students, the moments that had shaped her, just as much as she had shaped them. She would always cherish that time, but she knew she had made the right decision. The door to her office opened, and Noah stepped inside, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one in front of her before settling into the chair across from her desk. How are you settling in? He asked, leaning back slightly. She took a sip of the coffee, appreciating the warmth. Better than I expected. It's different, but in a good way. He nodded. I knew you'd adapt. You've always had a way of making things work. Laura studied him for a moment. He had grown into the kind of person she always believed he could be, focused, driven, but still carrying the same depth of kindness that had always been in him. You really built something incredible here, she said. Not just for yourself, but for the people who work for you. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Had good teachers. There was a sincerity in his voice that made her chest tight. She thought back to the first time she had handed him that $10 bill in the cafeteria, never imagining the ripple effect it would have. Noah set his cup down and pulled out a folder. I wanted to show you something, he said, sliding it across the desk. Laura opened it, her eyes scanning the documents inside. It was a new initiative, one aimed at providing mentorship and career guidance to underprivileged students. Her gaze lifted to his. This is what you've been working on. He nodded. I've been thinking about it for a long time. There are so many kids out there who just need someone to believe in them the way you believed in me. I want this company to be more than just a business. I want it to be a place that gives back. She turned the page, reading more about the program, the scholarships, the partnerships with schools in lower-income areas. It was ambitious, but it was exactly the kind of impact she had always dreamed of making. This is incredible, Noah, she said, her voice filled with admiration. I was hoping you'd help me shape it, he admitted. You know better than anyone what these students need. Laura exhaled slowly, overwhelmed by the full-circle moment unfolding before her. She had left teaching, but in a way, her purpose hadn't changed. She was still guiding, still helping. She closed the folder and met his gaze. "I would love to." Noah smiled, satisfaction clear in his expression. "Then let's get to work." As she reached for her pen, ready to dive into this new chapter, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: certainty. She had made the right choice. The future was bright, and for the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving.